Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I'm doing all the books I read in January and February. I didn't read a whole lot of books this month, but I did read a good amount in January, so I wanted to just bunch the two together just to make a good video overall. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and comment what your favorite book is that I read, and any books that you recommend along the same genres, because I am still looking to build my TBR list. The first book that I picked up was A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I started reading this one maybe the last couple days of December and into the first week of January, and finished it I think within that first week. This one I give a 4 out of 5. I did really enjoy this book, and it was the second fantasy I've picked up in the last year. I would say it pulled me in about halfway through. The beginning was a little bit slow, as is most beginning of series. Just getting to know the characters, getting to know the world building. The thing that I didn't really like about it, and that I noticed, and I don't know if anybody else really noticed, was that this book is kind of just a more exaggerated and darker turn of Beauty and the Beast. I felt like it kind of followed the same plot line and the same elements, but again, a lot darker and still its own original idea. I think the hard part about writers nowadays, this is coming from somebody who is trying to write a book, is there's not really an original idea anymore, and so you kind of have to base it off of something you already really enjoy and just exaggerate it and pull your own elements out of it. But I think she did really good in that, and she definitely continued to make it her own story within the rest of the series. I do still think that this is its own story, but I just kind of felt like it was very familiar, and I related it a lot to Beauty and the Beast. This book on a smut level is maybe a 2 out of 5. I honestly don't really remember a whole lot of the smut from this book, so either it wasn't really memorable or there just wasn't a whole lot. The thing about this series is you have a lot of the enemies to lovers trope, but it's done 2 times, so the enemies to lovers in this book honestly doesn't carry on the rest of the series, and so I think by reading the rest of the series I just wasn't really remembering a whole lot that came from this book. So overall, really great read. If you're looking for a good fantasy series, I would highly recommend A Court of Thorns and Roses by the author Sarah J. Maas, and I know a lot of people are familiar with her books. I wasn't when I stumbled upon it, so it was really fun for me to get into, but she has 2 other series, and from what I know, she crosses them into each other at times. And so right now I've started the Throne of Glass series, which I'll get into later, but overall, really easy read, really gets you into fantasy, and if you want more from the author, she has a lot of other books. Okay, the second book that I picked up is A Court of Mist and Fury, again by Sarah J. Maas. This is the second to the ACOTAR series, and I loved this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I loved the tropes we had in it, like enemies to lovers, the nightmare trope, lovers to enemies. It has a lot more world building. It is a thick book. This one I know a lot of people really enjoyed. This one does have a lot of detail, but I think it's a lot of necessary detail, and it's got a lot more of that world building aspect, and you're really introduced to fall in love with the city that's in this book. So you'll start to understand a lot of the references on Book Talk when you read this book. This one, the smut level, is definitely a 5 out of 5. I loved it, and you honestly didn't really get to much smut until I'd say about 10% in. Even that, not really that much, but you really start to fall in love with the characters. You fall in love with Feyre even more, who is our main character, and the love interest that she has is just phenomenal. I love that character, probably one of my favorite male characters. This one was intense, it was heartbreaking. The end of it, from what I've known with Sarah J. Maas books through reading them, is in the last like 200 to 100 pages, you're really just turning pages and you need to get to the next part because it is so intense. Your heart breaks for the main character, your heart breaks for her family and her friends, and her love interest, and it is just absolutely insane, and really carries into the third book. This book's comedy relief, really, I enjoyed it. I thought it was really lighthearted, and it was very sarcastic, and it really broke up a lot of the intense moments in this book, and I really fell in love with the main character, Feyre. I find a lot of the qualities that she has in this book, and in the other books that she is in, just to be really admirable, and I love this book and I love the characters. Of course, the third book that I picked up is A Court of Wings and Ruin, ACOWAR, and I gave this one, I believe, another 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed this book. I know a lot of people didn't like the first little bit of it because it was pretty slow, but I honestly really liked that. I loved the detail we had because, again, I thought it was very necessary detail, and you are brought back to the first love interest in the first book, and what he's been doing and what he's done, and you have some empathy and some sympathy for him, but overall you've really just grown to really hate this character. But towards the end of it, you're really just not sure how you feel about him anymore, whether you should hate him or love him or just let him be. And the second love interest in this book is just, again, amazing. Feyre and her second love interest is just phenomenal. The smut in this one, I think I gave it about a 3 out of 5. It wasn't a whole lot of smut just because we were focused on the war building, but this one was still amazing. The beginning was action-packed and it brought you in. I think it was just kind of towards the middle that it started to get a little bit more dragging, just because there was a lot of the scheming and war building. But yeah, this one I really enjoyed, and I find myself thinking about this book a lot. The ending was insane, and to be honest, it didn't pull a whole lot of emotion out of me, even though I felt like it should have, but I still very much enjoyed it, and it wasn't as dark as the last couple of books as far as the ending goes. The thing that I really liked about this book is a lot of those loose ends that you've gathered along the first two were tied up in this book, and you felt like you could move on. If I'm honest, I felt like the trilogy was enough for me, because I did start to read A Court of Frost and Starlight next, and I honestly haven't finished the 5th book, and so I'm waiting to finish that one before I order the next 2. But just to have the original trilogy, I really wanted those 3 books. So that brings me into A Court of Frost and Starlight, and this book I didn't like at all. I honestly rate it a 2 out of 5, and I struggled to give anything below a 3, just because I know the hard work that goes into reading these books and goes into writing these books. And so I'm glad I finished it, but I did have some things I really didn't like, such as you're not really following Feyre's point of view anymore. You are following, I think, 4 total characters in this one, and you're following Feyre, her second love interest, and 2 of the other side characters. And while Feyre and her love interest are in first person perspective, the other 2 are in third person. So not only are you switching POVs, you're switching the perspective of those POVs. And I just didn't like how confusing that got. I feel like if she would have kept it first person, I would have followed really easily, and I would have actually really loved that she switched and gave us more insight on more of the other characters. The thing that I have realized with Sarah J. Maas books is in her Throne of Glass series, that one is started out in a third person POV. So because that one was her first series that she's written, I understand that that's her writing style and that's the one she's most familiar in. And honestly, breaking into first person was a little bit different for her. So I kind of understand the perspective changes now. So I am a little bit more inclined to go and finish the 5th book, but it just really threw me off because within the first 3, you were just following in first person, you were focusing on one character, so it just got a little bit too confusing for me. This one, there wasn't a whole lot of smut either, and I felt like the third person just kind of ruined it for me, and I just didn't really feel like we were focusing on the 2 main characters that I really loved and that I connected with, and I really wanted to connect with the other 2, but I just wasn't able to get there with the writing style change. So yeah, I'm glad I finished that one, and then I started A Court of Silver Flames. Again, I don't have the physical book for this one because I do read on my Kindle. I don't have a score for this one just because, again, I only got about 70 pages in and then I DNF'd it. We stopped focusing so much on Feyre and Rysand, at least in the beginning, and from what I've heard on TikTok, I did kind of spoil a little bit for me. And it does sound like we do start to focus on Feyre again eventually in the book, but we do start to focus on her sister and one of the side characters, Cassian. And although I do like those characters, I've never really cared for Nesta, and I'm really disappointed because in the 3rd book you really start to fall in love with that character, and I feel like she really started to redeem herself and then took 5 steps backwards. When the 6th book comes out, I'm hoping by then I'll have the 5th one finished, or maybe it'll make me finish that one, but for right now I just needed a palette cleanse, and so I jumped to another series. And that series is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and there was a lot of hype that I saw on TikTok for this book and a lot of negative reviews, and so I was a little worried because I didn't want to start this book or start the series and have another experience like I did with Ekatar and just not enjoy the series anymore. I have been thinking about this series and these books nonstop since I finished them at the end of January. So this one, we're following the main character Violet and the other main character Xaden, and they are writers in a war college that are training to ride dragons. And if there is any fantasy book with dragons, I will hop onto that series so quick. It's not even funny. I will do that with TV shows, movies. I love anything with dragons, love anything with that fantasy world building. This book I give another 5 out of 5. It grabbed me within the first chapter, and this one I read with my dad, and my sister, who got about halfway through. My dad just finished this book and he's on the second book now, and then I just got my husband to start reading this book because I love it so much and I need to talk about it with some more people. My friend who is currently on the ACOTAR series, she's going to be finishing up the third book soon, and so as soon as she's done with the ACOTAR series, whether or not she wants to read the fourth or fifth, this is the book I'm starting her on. It's just under 500 pages, and so it's really not that long compared to the books that I normally like to read. This one I spent an entire Saturday reading in January when I started it on a Thursday, and so when I had the free weekend, I could not put this book down. I needed to get to the second one. The ending of this book, plot twist, it's something that I kind of guessed that would have come just because of how much she hinted at it. But I'm not going to spoil that for you guys, but the ending I really enjoyed the ending. I cried during this book, and any book that can pull an emotion out of me, whether it's happy, sad, love, whatever, this book made me cry for the loss of one of the characters, and I haven't had that feeling in a book in a long time. So I really this book is so good. Along with the dragons, you also have a lot of magic and war building, and you start to theory analyze and try to see what she's gonna pull out of the next few books, because I do think this one is a 5-book series. There's only 2 out right now, and so we are patiently waiting for the third one. But overall, great book. I actually really liked this one. I know a lot of people thought that it was slow or that it kind of copied other books. Again, I just think that there's not really an original idea out there anymore. It's really hard to think of something that nobody else has. And the other thing is a writer could write something without reading a book that somebody thinks they copied, just because the idea is just so broad. And so I honestly thought that she did a really great job at making this an original idea and concept. The 6th book that I picked up is Iron Flame. I picked this up immediately when I finished the first book, and it was just one that I had to order. I'm a little upset because when I ordered this book, it was bent in other areas, so the paper on the hardcover just isn't laying super nicely. This one I gave a 5 out of 5. I was really worried I wouldn't like this one because, again, there was a lot of negative reviews surrounding this book. A lot of people said it was slow, a lot of people said it was repetitive, and while there was some repetitive traits within the 2 main characters and their love interest, it did get annoying because they just kind of kept going back and forth on the same thing. But I felt like there was enough within the book that kind of separated all that for me. And so I honestly really enjoyed this book, and I found myself just waiting and flipping through each chapter and just trying to read as fast as I could to get Violet and Satan with each other again. The ending of this book has me in a chokehold. I cannot stop thinking about the ending of this book. I can't stop theory analyzing and trying to figure out what she's gonna pull out in the third book, because this book just leaves you on the worst cliffhanger and you just want more. You wanna know that everything's gonna be okay, but being a 5-book series, I honestly think the third book or the fourth book are just gonna rip into us, and it's gonna be really hard for the characters, and she's just gonna put them through a lot. Something I really liked about Fourth Wing is it took you up until a little bit over halfway through to even get to smut, and so you really got to enjoy the book. And so for my dad or my husband, who don't really like that aspect of books, they got to enjoy the storyline first before getting to that point. Overall, again, I loved this book, 5 out of 5, really enjoyed this read. Now, those are all the books that I read in January. I read 6 books total, and I would have had a 7th book if I had finished A Court of Silver Flames, but I just didn't. In February, I kind of started to hit a reader's rut just because the end of Fourth Wing was so dramatic and crazy to me that I took a few days off from reading before I picked up my next book. But the next book that I had to pick up was Throne of Glass, the first of that series. That book took me a minute to get through. Normally I can get through a book within a week, even with my crazy work schedule if I read enough pages. This one I think I got through about a week and a half, and it was good. I think I would give it a 3.5 stars out of 5, just because, again, it was third person. It's not my favorite writing style, but I don't want to judge a book just based off the writing style. I just felt like I didn't fall in love with the characters as instantly, and from what I've heard, it takes you a few books to really fall in love with these characters and really see what's going on. I like to know who the love interest is going to be, and from what I've kind of figured out with Sarah J. Maas, she makes you think you know, but then you don't, and then you have a constant rotating enemies to lovers, which I don't mind, but it's just a little bit hard to follow in this book. I did like the action we started to get into about halfway through and a little bit over halfway through, but I just kind of felt like it was a little repetitive. I kind of felt like I knew what was going on the whole time, and so I wasn't really being caught off guard. Overall, I do think it was a good start to this series. I am on the second book to that series right now. I am just taking a break right now because I'm kind of in a reader's rut. Overall, it was really good. I enjoyed it. I'm excited to keep reading, and I'm excited to see how she kind of pulls the different characters into the other novels from the other series that she has. The second book that I read in February was If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. To say I'm disappointed by this book is a little bit of an understatement. I was really excited to read this book. Last year, a lot of the books that got me back into reading was Colleen Hoover, and I know not a lot of people like her books, but there was a good select few that I really enjoyed. I was really excited to start it and read it, and just judging from the title alone and everybody's reactions, I thought it was really gonna be a good tearjerker. I thought I was really gonna fall in love with these characters and have an emotional attachment to this book. I didn't. Thought that she rushed it, but also just at the ending. Overall, the book was a drag. I wasn't really getting the details that I wanted. This book follows Autumn and her love interest, Finny, who is her childhood best friend. But throughout middle school and high school, she and him just kind of broke off and found different friend groups. She started dating somebody else, he started dating somebody else, and up until graduation, she was still dating this guy. He had broken up with that girl a couple times, gotten back together with him, or gotten back together with her, and so right after graduation, when they were finally both broken up, or at least she was, they started to get together. He was gonna break up with his girlfriend because he wanted to be with Autumn. And shocker at the end due to the title. If you don't want a spoiler to this book, then just skip. But Finny does die in a car accident, and Autumn is torn apart, and so she tries to take an attempt on her life, and it was just, I felt like it could have been executed a lot better. I felt like there could have been a trigger warning in it as well, just because it was so sudden that character tried to do what she did. I feel like if we had gotten more with the two main characters and why they were love interests in the first place, I felt like I would have fallen in love with them more and felt more emotionally attached. But regardless, I think I give this one honestly a 2 out of 5, just because I finished it and it was easy to finish. I was just disappointed because I was looking for a good palette cleanse off of Throne of Glass before I started the second one, and so I could keep up the momentum of the books I was reading. But I feel like it just kind of pushed me further into a book rut. So right now I am going to just try and finish the second book of Throne of Glass and then pick up another series and see if I can get through those pretty quickly. Those are all the books that I read in January and February. I honestly really enjoyed them. I used to be a big reader back in high school, middle school, and elementary school, but when my parents got divorced, I just kind of stopped reading for a while. I picked it back up a little bit in 2019, but then just fell away from it again. But I'm just really happy to be reading again. It's a big part of my life and a big part of who I am. My goal is to write a book, and I'm actually working on a few different ideas now. A few of them are actually on paper. So I'm just really excited, and I just want to share a little bit more of my love for reading, a little bit more of the thought process I have while reading and the ideas surrounding different books. So if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you want to see more, hit the bell button. I'm going to try and post at least once a month, but honestly, I work a 10-4 shift with my work. So I work 10-hour days, 4 days a week, and every other weekend I have a 4-day weekend. So in theory, I do have a lot more time than I used to, but I also don't at the same time. So it just depends on what I am doing. But overall, I should have at least one video out a month, at least on what I've been reading. I am gonna be filming my favorite books that I've read, so look out for that video. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have similar ideas with these books and when I rated them, or if you disagree with me, I'd love to hear in the comments. I respect your opinion, please respect mine. These are just my honest ratings and how I felt about the books and how they made me feel. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next video.